Hi, and welcome to another Rise video. Again, Rise is the tabletop RPG that I've been working on and developing for some time now. It's similar to Dungeons & Dragons, and one of the concepts that I wanted to discuss with Rise today is something called targeting and another thing called fatigue. Now, there may be some examples of systems like this that could exist in other tabletop RPGs, but I think the combination of how I've put it into Rise makes it unique. And I think it works very well with all of the character customization options that are in Rise. So first off, targeting. The way targeting works is before you declare to attack an opponent, you can choose to target certain body parts of that opponent. And depending on the body part you choose, it will make the attack more difficult for you to land. So for example, the one you can see here, oh, by the way, I have some interesting art on here. I'll link the artist down below. I just thought it'd be interesting to put it on there. So the first example we can see here is if you target the vitals of an opponent, that would be like the middle section, the organs, all that. It increases the target number of the attack by 2, so that's that TN plus 2 there. So what that means is, let's say I'm going to attack an opponent that normally has a defense of 13. Well, if I want to attack their vitals, now that 13 gets increased by 2 to a 15. Let's say I roll and I attack. If I only land a 14, that means I completely missed my opponent. It doesn't mean that I still get to hit them, I just don't target their vitals. It completely misses. And that's because when you target the body parts of an opponent, you get some really good effects. And in addition to this, you can possibly, if you roll doubles on your attack and you land and you hit the targeted body part, you can get even more effects and rack up even more damage against the opponent. So first off here, we have the vitals. You have to increase your target number by 2. If you hit their vitals, then the result is that target's next ability test suffers a -1 penalty. So that could be a resistance test to something that another one of your teammates does, or it could be their next attack roll is at -1. This isn't that great, and that's because it's just the first one that you would do. It's just the most basic of targetings attacks. But if you roll up to 3 doubles points when you attack this target, then you're able to make that next ability test also at disadvantage. So this makes it very good. So next up, oh, and by the way, disadvantage means they have to roll twice, and they take the lower of the 2 rolls. So the next body part that you could target is the groin. And if you are able to land an attack on the groin, then the target loses their next minor or movement action. The target gets to choose. But if you get that 3 doubles points, you get to use the stunt that the target loses both their minor and their movement action. So severely limiting what they're able to do on their next turn. Next up, we have if you are able to target the target's legs, that increases your targeting number by 4 to hit them. If you hit the legs, you're crippling their legs, resulting in movement speed being halved and a reduction to their defense until they receive healing. So this is already pretty good, but if you manage to snag these 6 doubles points, you can completely sever a leg. And I think this is where the targeting gets very interesting, because we start to get into like kind of permanently damaging opponents just with a single attack. And you'll see as we keep going, some of these can even result in instant death. Next up, we have hands, or I guess arms. So if you're able to target the hand, this requires a +5 to your attack. Then their hand is crippled, resulting in that they're disarmed, right? And they can't hold anything with that hand, any weapons or tools. Now, they have 2 hands, so this might not always be beneficial to you. But especially if you're trying to specifically knock something out of a target's hand, or take something away from them, this is a very good targeting attack to go for. And if you get those 4 doubles points, you can use the stunt to result in severing of their hand. So next, if you attack their head, and I was like, okay, head, well, I didn't want to make it, so if you hit their head, they're just like dead instantly. That'll come later. But if you hit their head, the target gains a level of fatigue. And I'm actually going to talk about fatigue after we talk about these targeting attacks. But in order to hit the head, you need a +6. This can sometimes be really beneficial depending on if the target already has fatigue or not. And I'm actually considering to bring this up to 2 levels of fatigue. And you know what? I'll actually do that, because it's pretty hard to hit it. So we'll just say the target gains 2 levels of fatigue, and if you get those 4 doubles points, you knock them prone and they lose their next major action. Next up, if you're able to target the neck, that's a +7. The target receives double damage from this attack, and if you get to 8 doubles points, which in order to get 8 doubles points, you have to roll 3 of a kind. You need to roll 3 4s, 3 5s, or 3 6s. So it's very difficult. There's only 3 possible rolls you could make to receive this result of chopping their head off completely, which I think for most things, if you cut their head off, they're dead for good. And then finally, the eyes. That requires a +8 to hit them, specifically targeting the eyes. If you do, then their result, they're blinded essentially until they get healing. But all you need is 2 doubles points to permanently blind them. So even if they receive healing, they're not able to receive their sight back. And I thought, make this targets both their eyes. It's not just like one eye, both their eyes, as long as their eyes are relatively close to each other. And when they're blind, they have a -5 to hitting targets, and they're unable to make perception seeing tests. So again, let's go back to this idea of the head with fatigue. So you might be wondering, what's the benefit of fatiguing an opponent? So if we look at fatigue in the Rise system, fatigue, actually I can zoom in just a little bit more here. There we go. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, technically 6 levels of fatigue here. And what these do is the fatigue rolls determine, or not rolls, fatigue statuses determine what you're able to do in combat and how tired your character is. So the first level of fatigue, well, I'll say the baseline level of fatigue is not being fatigued at all, but also just being normal. There's no status really here. You're just a normal. You're not tired, but you're also not full of energy. Now, if you're able to get 8 hours of sleep, you are able to become well-rested. Now, what well-rested does, this can vary. Some abilities can only be used while you're well-rested. Some of them get bonus effects while you're well-rested. But mostly, well-rested is the status that kind of is a cushion for resisting effects of fatigue. So if you're well-rested and you take a level of fatigue, you just go back down to normal. The next level of fatigue is called weary. When you're weary, you are reduced to being at half your movement speed. Now, half movement speed can be bad, but generally isn't going to be too big of a deal. And the way you can recover from this is by just taking a 15-minute rest after combat. Next up, we get to drained. Drained will require you resting for 2 straight hours. Resting for 2 hours. It doesn't mean sleeping, just resting. And what this does is it makes you lose your movement action entirely. You cannot use a movement action until you've rested for 2 hours. So generally, if you're targeting that head, like we mentioned before, you'll probably bring a foe down to drained, and they've completely lost their movement action for the next 2 hours, essentially. If they were already weary, which could happen, you can gain levels of fatigue whenever you're, failing endurance tests, or if you're trying to cast spells and you couldn't quite make it, you can take a level of fatigue to boost up that spell. If you get down to exhausted, in order to recover from being exhausted, that requires 8 hours of sleep. Yes, you have to sleep. And if you're exhausted and you sleep for 8 hours, you do not go to well-rested. You just go back to regular. You could be drained and sleep for 8 hours and go to well-rested, but you can't go straight from exhausted to well-rested. Now, if you are exhausted, you lose both your movement action and your minor action until you sleep. You can't have any minor or movement actions unless you recover from being exhausted. There are some potions that can help recover levels of fatigue, though. And then finally, dying is the final state of fatigue here that we're going to look at. There's a lot to write on here for dying. I'm not going to go over quite everything here. I'll summarize some of this for you, though. Essentially, when you're dying, you enter dying if you get reduced to 0 HP, or if you take a level of fatigue past exhausted. Once you're dying, you lose consciousness. You follow 0 HP. You have to roll death saving throws. What that means is you have to make endurance tests. If you pass 3 endurance tests, this target number 11 endurance test without a focus, you can restore yourself back to 1 HP. Or if some ally or somebody else comes around and tries to heal you, you won't receive any health, but you will go back from 0 HP to 1 HP and you're no longer dying. But if you do recover from being dying, you go back to the exhausted state. So you could easily start dying again because you don't have your movement or minor action. In addition to this, if you do not pass those 3 death saving throws, or let's say you run out of death saving throws, you're instantly dead. You get a minimum of 3 death saving throws, but you get an equal number of death saving throws equal to your endurance. Again, minimum of 3. So if your endurance is 6, you get 6 chances to make those death saving throws. But if your endurance is 3 or lower, you only get 3 chances. Meaning if you can fail one and not be instantly dead, but once you run out of them, then you're instantly dead. So let's say I fail my first one, I'm like, okay, well, I'm basically guaranteed to be dead if I can't, if nobody heals me after my 3rd death saving throw. So essentially, you get 3 rounds until you're dead. But if you're lucky and pass all 3 death saving throws, then you're not dead. In addition to this, if you take any damage while you're dying, you're instantly dead. And every time you go down into the dying state and expend a death saving throw, you will not recover that death saving throw until you take a long rest. That's about 8 hours of rest there. So, also, if you're not dying and you take more than half of your maximum HP and damage, you could also instantly die. Next up, let's look at something similar to fatigue, and I call this the sobriety table. So first stage, you're sober. No normal effects, nothing. Then you have to fail a endurance poison resist test while drinking alcohol in order to reach buzzed. Once you're buzzed, it takes 1 hour of recovery, and when you're buzzed, you suffer a penalty to your dexterity, but you gain 1 heart. While tipsy, again, you have to fail a second alcohol test. You suffer a penalty to 2 dexterity and -1 perception, plus 1 heart. When you're drunk, requires 4 hours of healing, or just resting, or doing anything. Just generally after 4 hours, you won't be drunk anymore. -3 to dexterity, -1 to all other attributes, so no longer getting that heart bonus. And if you want to make any movement actions, you have to make a target number 14 dexterity balance test. Otherwise you can't sprint or charge. Once you're wasted, that's 8 hours, -4 to dexterity, -2 to all other your attributes. You have to pass a target number 18 dexterity balance test. Otherwise, you completely lose your movement action and you can't sprint or charge. And then if you continue drinking past wasting and you keep failing these tests, then you just lose consciousness and you're dying again, just like with the fatigue roll dying. So that has been targeting and fatigue in the Rise system. Next video, we're going to be talking about, I want to talk about actually the world building of the kind of world that I'm starting to work on. And this is the world I'm calling Alara. It's actually an exomoon. I'm really interested and excited to talking to you guys about that. So I hope you stay tuned for the next video. If you like this video, please like it. If you want to see the next video or the videos to come, please subscribe to this channel. I am working on getting this stuff ready to be able to sell to people and you guys to be able to download it and enjoy it and use it yourselves. Obviously, I'm putting all this stuff on YouTube, so if you want to use the YouTube videos as a reference for free, you can totally do that. If you want to make characters, I'm going to have a character sheet coming out really soon if you're interested in it. Otherwise, I really hope you guys are enjoying this stuff. I enjoy making it. Let's look at this again. Wow, look at that's just great. I enjoy making this stuff, so if you're interested, please subscribe. We'll see you next time. This is Rise. My name's Alex. Bye-bye.